and welcome back to 2 new creepypastas. I hope you enjoy it. The silence beneath. I never used to believe in the supernatural. My name is Alex, and I'm an ordinary guy with an ordinary job, living in an ordinary town. At least, I used to be. What happened to me a year ago shattered my perception of reality and left me questioning everything I once held true. It all began when I inherited my grandfather's old house. Nestled deep in the woods, it was an ancient, creaky mansion that hadn't been lived in for decades. My grandfather was a reclusive man, a historian obsessed with the occult. He spent most of his life in that house, surrounded by dusty tomes and bizarre artifacts. When I arrived, the house was exactly as I remembered from my childhood visits, dark, brooding, and filled with an eerie silence that seemed almost palpable. Despite the chill running down my spine, I felt compelled to stay there, if only to honor his memory and sort through his extensive collection of books and notes. The first few nights were uneventful. The house was drafty and full of strange noises, but nothing I couldn't attribute to its age and disrepair. However, on the fourth night, I discovered something unusual. While exploring the basement, I found a hidden door behind a stack of rotting wooden crates. The door was small and made of heavy, dark wood, with intricate carvings that seemed to pulse under the dim light of my flashlight. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pried the door open. Inside, I found a narrow stone staircase descending into darkness. The air was thick and musty, and the sound of my breathing echoed eerily off the stone walls. I felt an inexplicable pull to go down those stairs, as if something was calling to me from the depths. At the bottom of the stairs, I found a large, circular room with walls lined with ancient books and strange symbols. In the center of the room was a stone pedestal, and atop it lay a large, leather-bound book. The cover was adorned with a strange, shimmering symbol that seemed to shift and change as I looked at it. Unable to resist, I opened the book. It was filled with bizarre writings and illustrations, detailing rituals and incantations that sent shivers down my spine. As I flipped through the pages, I came across a passage written in a language I didn't recognize. The words seemed to pulse and writhe on the page, almost as if they were alive. Without thinking, I began to read the passage aloud. The moment the last word left my lips, the room grew unbearably cold, and the shadows seemed to grow deeper and more menacing. A low, guttural whisper filled the air, and I felt a presence in the room with me, something ancient and malevolent. Panicked, I slammed the book shut and fled back up the stairs. I locked the hidden door behind me, but I could still feel the presence, lurking just out of sight. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. Objects would move on their own, doors would open and close by themselves, and I would hear whispers in the dead of night, calling my name. One evening, as I sat in the study going through my grandfather's notes, I found a letter addressed to me. It was dated just a few days before his death, and warned me never to open the hidden door in the basement. He wrote of a powerful entity trapped beneath the house, an ancient being that he had spent his life trying to contain. He begged me to leave the house and never return, for the entity would stop at nothing to be free. Terrified, I decided to leave the house the next morning. I packed my bags and tried to get some sleep, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent. As I lay in bed, paralyzed with fear, I saw a shadowy figure standing at the foot of my bed. It had no discernible features, just a dark, formless mass that radiated malice. The figure spoke in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a voice that chilled me to my core. "You cannot leave," it said. "You belong to me now." I blacked out. When I woke up, it was morning, and the figure was gone. I grabbed my bags and ran out of the house, not stopping until I reached the nearest town. I vowed never to return to that accursed place, but the damage was already done. Even now, a year later, I can still hear the whispers. They follow me wherever I go, growing louder each day. I fear that the entity has attached itself to me, that it will never let me go. I've tried everything, exorcisms, rituals, even moving to a different country, but nothing works. I'm writing this as a warning to anyone who might come across my grandfather's house. Stay away. Don't let curiosity lead you down the same path I took. Some doors are better left unopened, and some secrets are better left buried. If you ever hear the whispers, run and never look back. My name is Laura, and I used to be an avid hiker. I loved nothing more than exploring new trails, breathing in the fresh forest air, and feeling the crunch of leaves under my boots. But that all changed last summer during a trip to the Whispering Woods, a secluded forest on the outskirts of my hometown. Now, I can't even look at a tree without feeling a deep, paralyzing fear. I had heard stories about the Whispering Woods growing up. People in town said it was haunted, that strange things happened to those who ventured too deep into its heart. But I never paid much attention to those tales. I chalked them up to old superstitions and overactive imaginations. When my friend Mike suggested we spend a weekend camping there, I eagerly agreed. We invited our friends Sarah and Jake to join us, and soon we were all packed and ready for adventure. We set off on a bright Friday morning, the sun shining through the canopy as we made our way down the narrow, winding trail. The forest was beautiful, with towering trees and a thick carpet of moss. Birds chirped merrily overhead, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. It seemed like the perfect place to escape from the hustle and bustle of daily life. As we ventured deeper into the woods, I began to notice a change in the atmosphere. The air grew cooler and the cheerful sounds of the forest faded away, replaced by an eerie silence. The trees seemed taller and more oppressive, their branches intertwining to form a dense, impenetrable barrier. I brushed off the uneasy feeling, determined to enjoy the trip. We found a small clearing to set up camp and spent the afternoon exploring the area. Mike and Jake tried their hand at fishing in a nearby stream, while Sarah and I gathered firewood and prepared dinner. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we gathered around the campfire, laughing and telling stories. It was then that we first heard the whispers. At first, I thought it was just the wind playing tricks on us, but the sound was too distinct, too deliberate. It was a soft, hushed murmuring just on the edge of hearing. We fell silent, straining to make out the words, but they were in a language none of us recognized. "Did you hear that?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "Yeah," Mike replied, his brow furrowed. "Probably just the wind." But deep down, we all knew it wasn't the wind. The whispers continued throughout the night, growing louder and more insistent. They seemed to be coming from all around us, closing in on our camp. Despite our unease, we managed to fall asleep, exhausted from the day's hike. I woke up in the middle of the night to find the campfire extinguished and the forest shrouded in darkness. The whispers were louder now, almost a chorus, and I could feel a presence watching us. I turned on my flashlight and scanned the area, but saw nothing. As I lay back down, I noticed something strange. The trees around our camp seemed to have moved closer, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The next morning, we packed up our gear and decided to continue our hike, hoping to find a less eerie spot to camp. But no matter how far we walked, the whispers followed us, growing louder and more malevolent. We came across an old, overgrown path that seemed to lead deeper into the forest. Against my better judgment, we decided to follow it, hoping it would lead us out of the woods. As we walked, the whispers grew louder and the air grew colder. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees leaning in as if trying to listen to our conversations. "We need to get out of here," Jake said, his face pale. "This place isn't safe." We hurriedly left the cabin and continued our trek, but the forest seemed determined to keep us trapped. The trees grew denser, the paths more confusing, and the whispers more maddening. Night fell, and we were forced to set up camp once more. The whispers were relentless, and none of us could sleep. In the middle of the night, I heard a scream. I bolted upright to see Sarah standing at the edge of the clearing, staring into the darkness. Her eyes were wide with terror, and she was shaking uncontrollably. "Sarah, what's wrong?" I called out, but she didn't respond. Instead, she began to walk into the woods as if in a trance. We tried to stop her, but she moved with a strength and determination that was unnatural. We followed her, desperate to bring her back, but she seemed to be guided by an unseen force. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, and I could feel a cold, malevolent presence all around us. We finally caught up to Sarah at the edge of a large, blackened clearing. In the center stood a massive, twisted tree, its gnarled branches reaching out like claws. At its base was a dark, yawning hole that seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. "Sarah, no!" Mike shouted. But it was too late. She stepped into the hole and disappeared. Panic set in, and we turned to flee, but the forest seemed to close in around us. The whispers were deafening now, a cacophony of voices that filled my mind with terror. I felt something cold and slimy wrap around my ankle and I was dragged toward the tree. I fought and screamed, but it was no use. As I was pulled into the darkness, I saw Mike and Jake being dragged toward the tree as well. The last thing I remember is the sound of their screams, mingling with the whispers, as the darkness consumed us. I woke up in a hospital a few days later, found by a search and rescue team. They told me I was lucky to be alive, but Mike, Jake, and Sarah were never found. The forest was searched extensively, but there was no sign of them or the twisted tree. I've tried to move on with my life, but the whispers never left me. They haunt my every waking moment, a constant reminder of the horrors I witnessed in the whispering woods. I've seen doctors, therapists, even paranormal investigators, but no one can help me. The whispers are always there, growing louder and more insistent. I fear that the entity in the woods has marked me, that it won't rest until it claims me completely. I don't know how much longer I can hold on. If you're reading this, please heed my warning. Stay away from the whispering woods. Don't let curiosity lead you to the same fate. Some places are better left untouched, and some secrets are better left buried. If you ever hear the whispers, run, and never look back. Because once you hear them, it's already too late. Thank you for watching. Have a good night of sleep and stay safe. Please consider subscribing. It is completely free.